July 1st. Happy Canada Day to everybody out there. Unfortunately, this is the time we normally would be deeply in free agent talk. So we're going to do some free agent talk today for sure. And we're going to have a quick little pre-show before that. Russ has something to say that I have something to say. But Russ, go ahead. Give us something. Tell us, Russ.
Well, yesterday was a sad day because minor league baseball was officially canceled in a lot of cities around the U.S. I know some were holding out some hope, even the ones that weren't canceled by Major League Baseball, but the ones that were still on the list that were supposedly good. Now they're going to go a year without pay. This is people's jobs, livelihoods, summer jobs, but also the players. I heard a number yesterday that there are about 200 players out of work. Now, with MLB reporting to camp today, with these 60-man rosters, they're going to have about 3 top prospects on there. I heard that some top prospects for some teams already, there were guys reporting this, that are now looking for jobs because they can't afford to make ends meet. And I think this is really horrible from the standpoint of Major League Baseball because they knew that they were going to lop off teams in a year. And yes, the virus, you could blame everything you want on the virus, but they should have had something in place that basically took care of a certain amount of these prospects. Even if it's, hey, you know what? We're going to set up this temporary league so all you guys can play so they could keep playing. Because at the end of the day, the sport is going to lose a ton of talent because some players will never come back. Some players may get hurt in another line of work. Let's say they go to construction or something. Yeah. There's going to be more teams that'll go bankrupt than they expected because of the virus. And now next year, even though they had this great list that said, hey, we're going to lop off like 42 teams, they may be lopping off another 20 or more because they can't afford to operate. So it's really bad. Like, this is probably the worst it's been since like the 1920s.
Yeah, and Major League Baseball was thinking of the players when they collected a whole bunch of applications for FedEx as they were walking out the door. Because that's basically what their plan was. It's a disgrace. Now, I know that a lot of people in Buffalo made a big deal about, the Bisons not playing this year because, it's a fairly popular AAA team, draws, 15, 20,000 on a Friday night, probably because the beer is cheap, but it's also a summer thing. Yeah. And that's going to be missing the entire year. And it's the first time since 1978 that they haven't had a season. So it sucks. It really does suck.
No, I mean, Russ knows my view on this pretty well, and I'm right in lockstep with him. I read yesterday, I think there could be 160 franchises that could potentially go out of business. Baseball, minor league baseball is part of the fabric. Towns come together, as Mike said, it's a Friday night, Saturday thing, but it is embedded in a framework of the town. I can just say, for example, by me, out on the island, the Long Island Ducks, which is part of the Independent League, part of the Atlantic League, had been talking to try to have a season. They talked about having a 70-game season with maybe 25 to 30% capacity, and they couldn't figure it out, and announced late yesterday that they wouldn't be participating in the league and there may not be a league at all. That's granted, there are guys that have gone back from independent league back to regular minor leagues and into somewhat the major leagues, but baseball in itself has done an absolutely horrific job. First of all, Rob Manfred has done a horrible job with this. They've talked about this because they wanted to contract. Now, baseball is a money-making operation. Baseball in itself as a operation in general has made a pretty good, healthy amount of money, especially as you see it as franchise values have risen. And I understand that the minor leagues are independent because they're their own franchisees and they're attached to organizations to a certain extent. But you can't tell me there's no rhyme or reason that Major League Baseball, couldn't figure a way to pay some of these guys, especially now that they've contracted and aren't paying these guys $400 a month, which is just ridiculous to begin with in terms of the amount of money they get paid because not everybody's a bonus baby. B, it is the feeder system for the pros. You've now lost a year of development, even if you are going to have these 30-player taxi squads. So guys who might have come up for another year, you've lost it. You've now shortened your draft from 10 to 5 rounds, which has reduced the number of jobs. And overall, you've now completely obliterated what was a tremendous system for the major leagues to bring guys up to the majors and have them go lockstep level by level or move up 2 levels. You don't have that anymore, and you wonder, why are players going to look to go into baseball down the road when there's other opportunities available to them?
And I'd also add to it as well that I think there's a chance that some of these players are going to be rushed up. The ones that are in system are going to be rushed up far too soon. Sure. Here in Philadelphia, there's talk of having both Alec Boehm and Spencer Howard potentially in the rotation and not necessarily playing in Lehigh. to start the year when they should basically be getting their normal developmental time. And now it feels like everything's been moved up much too quickly. And I think that's another area of damage that potentially may occur, because baseball has to have that incremental step to get those incremental steps of development. You're not physically ready for the arduous of the season. Even if it is a 60-game season, it's going to be tightly compacted.
Here's the other key thing, too, for people that want to say, well, it's a business, Russ. They have an antitrust exemption. Congress could take it away anytime they feel like it, because they're not technically a business. They're more like a public trust. And they've been able to operate like a business for a long time, and I think they should relook at that.
One quick thing before we start. We were scolded on Twitter and scolded on email. Forwarded
we got all kinds of stuff about this. Yeah, this is
forwarded by Captain EO to me, since I'm the one who we need to get the pronunciation correct, because if you remember in 2016, up until I think the draft combine, everybody thought it was Patrick Lane, and we found out it was Line. Well, apparently all of us, including Kevin Allen, were guilty of mispronouncing. It's Alexis Lafreniere and not Lafreniere.
Right, and we should have had this right. I mean, I took 5 years of French, and I know what this means.
You know what? Here's what happened.
So we screwed up.
I want to explain what happens to when guys like us do this job, or we're on the air in radio, and you're trying to formulate what you're going to say next, because you're waiting your turn and you're trying to say what you want to say about the player, and you have to keep all this in your head. Sometimes you know the correct pronunciation and it still doesn't come out. Yeah. And the minute you say it, you know you said it wrong, but the show must go on, and that's what you do. You come behind the mic here, and if you want to pronounce it right every single time, then let's see what kind of show you can do there, buddy.
I personally will take a different tack than Russ here and say,
no, I'm just saying it's reality.
I appreciate it. And, this with the E with the line over it like that, that's the same as Danny Briere's name. So we should have known it was Lafreniere, because it ends with the same E-R-E, with the same E thing over top of that line. So, yes, it is Lafreniere. And it does matter. It does matter. We apologize. I mean, but it is, Russ is right. Russ especially has to come up with all kinds of pronunciations, so I can understand.
We have mispronounced names for 15 years on Sirius. You don't do it on purpose, but it happens.
Yeah.
Remember Dustin Bafuglin?
But this is, that's the only way I can remember how to spell his name. I mean, he's Dustin Bafuglin.
I always got a kick, especially when I was talking with some of the Flyers reporters on the pronunciation on Russian players, because you guys know my wife is and how you emphasize the middle versus the end. And I still remember getting it. Tim Saunders going, I'm going to call him whatever I feel like. I'm like, fine, Tim, go right ahead.
For a long time, Sergei Makarov or Sergei Makarov.
It was Provorov, right? Provorov, Ivan Provorov, that's proper pronunciation. Or the tough one for everybody was Medvedev.
Nobody was saying that.
That was tough. I still remember Sasha, the translator, the skating coach, who was, when I pronounced it correctly, he got light-eyed and gave me 2 thumbs up, and it's but your radio guy is going to be like, nope.
I would appreciate a pat on the back from the German audience we have for saying Stutzler right. So there you go.
There you go. Well, there you have it.
Valerie Zelapukin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. As a writer, though, I mean, don't you all just say these names how you spell them? Because that's what you end up doing. That's what I do all the time. I had that in my head, it will always be Bafuglin.
Right. Well, the one that always makes me giggle is Stan Neskash.
Neckar.
I called him Neckar for about the first 6 months.
He was a big, relatively big guy, so he was physically big too. So you always think, big neck.
No, but like Martin Necas, it's Necas. If you never hear that name, you're not going to know how to pronounce it. Now,
how about Shea on the Rangers? Come on, let's talk about him for a second.
Right.
How the hell do you spell that name? I still don't understand.
Saturday Night Live skit, for goodness.
But honestly, we didn't mispronounce it on purpose. And I've heard the correct pronunciation. But again, when you get tied up in a show, you forget.
Yeah, no, but we appreciate you guys pointing out when we're wrong. That's what the internet's all about, pointing out when we're wrong. I've learned that's what I think the internet's about. That's what I've learned. Okay, so let's move on.
Yep, let's start the show.
Yes, I mean sometimes you're wrong about big things, like draft lottery stuff.
No,
Right.
You're wrong about other little things.
I'm never wrong about that stuff.
Oh, neither am I. Can I tell that story? Oh my god. All right, so real quick. No, forget it. I'm not going
Let's start the show.
Let's start the show. Great story, though. All right, hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, July 1st. Happy Canada Day. It's Wednesday, July 1st, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and yes, I'm wearing blue.
Yes, there you go.
I'm Anthony Mingioni wearing not blue.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
It's Jan Levine, not pictured. And I am Eklund. You're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. I feel you into the comings and goings in the hockey world. And right now, this should be the time we're talking about UFAs. So we're going to talk about UFAs today. We're definitely going to get to that. We're going to talk about my top 5 UFAs today, and then my 6 through 10 tomorrow, and then 10 through 20 on Friday, I guess it would be. But let's start with 5 through 10 today, but 1 through 5 today. But first, before we do that, it is Canada Day. And there's no better day on Canada Day to announce that it seems like that we're going to see an announcement that 2 Canadian teams are going to be hosting this, which is something that we have been saying for a while now. Or, I've been reporting that everybody that I keep here, everybody I talk to in the NHL is not happy about Vegas. It's not definite about Vegas. It's not definite about Vegas. And now today, McKenzie comes out and says, unless something drastically changes, it is indeed Edmonton and Toronto.
Well, and the funny thing is that Vegas seemed to be the certain place, and then apparently from what I have read, it only changed in the last 48 hours. Now, I know that we've heard Edmonton, but remember the Toronto thing was what was up in the air until a couple of weeks ago when the Ontario government sort of opened things up. Yeah. So that when Toronto became viable, then it was there's your Eastern team, and now the Western one. I think probably in the end, the fact that there are very little infections going on in Edmonton and that Vegas is blowing up was, in spite of the fact that the Vegas plan was the MGM hotel in Vegas and the area around it was, quote, the bubble, unquote, whereas I actually think that players are going to be able to actually go outside and golf and do other things in Edmonton without as much fear as they would have had going out for breakfast in Vegas.
I think my only fear is just having 2 hubs in the same country in case they get it worse, maybe on the rebound, because we had it worse at the beginning.
It's such a friggin' big country, though. You really can't even say it.
You can't say that, though.
Toronto have nothing to do with each other.
It has nothing to do with, it has nothing to do with the size. It has everything to do with people coming in and going out.
Well, what I'm saying is it has nothing to do with Edmonton and Toronto couldn't have nothing to do. They're less, there's less to do with Mexico City and Philadelphia. It's these, you're talking about 2,000 miles apart from each other.
Once you get to this point, that my whole thing is you might as well cancel it then if that's going to be Russell.
No. I'm just saying that's just my own personal feeling. I think Edmonton's fine. Otherwise, the only reason I didn't think it was going to happen was because I didn't think players would like it for the nightlife and the other things they were talking about. It's fine. It's great for hockey.
Out, though. If you can leave the bubble a little bit, that changes things.
Sure.
Now, and it's funny because what we talk about, so you say there is not wrong because that's what people are thinking. But I heard it said the other day, and it's so perfect that we've treated this virus like there is one weather forecast for the United States of America. What's the weather going to be on Tuesday in the United States of America? That's just not. We can't. Right. It's just way too big. You can't look at it like that. And
no, but the thing is that the areas that were Vegas is an area that is spiking. Arizona, Texas, Florida are spiking. Right. So
things are great in New York right now, or you're pretty good in Philadelphia or whatever. It doesn't mean that and things were terrible there before, and they were perfect in Arizona. So it's completely hard. This. You just don't have one weather forecast for the country.
Yeah, and who's to say that in 3 weeks that the areas that are spiking right now won't recess back to a lower figure. But the problem is that the NHL right now can only go with the evidence that they have in front of them. And if there's nothing in Edmonton, or literally next to nothing in Edmonton, and the trends in Toronto are going down, and all the facilities that they have in terms of practice facilities and everything else works, then it makes a lot of sense. Now, we're sort of burying the lead because...
Well, actually, Mike, before we bury the lead, one more thing about Edmonton. So it's not like they don't have anything, because if you look online, they're not celebrating Canada Day with fireworks and people outside. They're actually doing a virtual fireworks So it's still not like
Well, that's
they
because
can
they're
do
being so careful, which is great. That's
No,
what,
no, but
that's what you like about it.
right. But what I'm basically saying is, what you're saying, these players can go outside and do whatever they want.
Right.
It's not that free. There's still some issues like any other city in the world, honestly.
Yeah, and they're doing that. Or they're doing that here for July 4th. Normally, there's a big fireworks display in Buffalo down on the waterfront, and what they're going to do now are sort of localized fireworks in different areas, so people don't have to leave their houses. They can just go in their backyard and watch the fireworks, and that's a good way. So I mean, that's smart. But
that's been going on around here anyway. I don't know about you guys, but like fireworks are like an incredibly popular thing right now among people in general.
In our area, the thing is, where we live, because Eck doesn't live far from me, and neither does Russ. We feel like we're the fireworks capital of the world. Sometimes.
It's just ridiculous. Every night
my dog has been scared for like a week and a half.
Well, Andrew,
did you see that? Actually, Russ, just you got to for 1 second. Did you see the beginning? You have to watch the beginning of the Colbert Show the other night because it has a dog on there talking about what the heck's the deal with the Sky Fire. They thought the Sky Fire was supposed to be 1 day a year, and now it's going to be every day. It's like you're exactly right. Dogs are losing it because
my dog gets Xanax with dinner, and that's the way it's been for the last week and a half.
We all, Russ. I mean, honestly,
if it's the Colbert Show, there's a dog on it every.
Not a bad idea.
I've been doing that for months. Yeah.
If it's the Colbert Show, there's a dog on there every time. But
Hannity is great. Anyhow,
I don't watch Hannity either. But okay. The interesting thing here is I was saying the lead has been buried because not only do we have possibly the hub cities guaranteed, but I think the big news is the advancement of the CBA to the point that it sounds like they have an agreement in principle.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, a lot of the stuff is the stuff we've already talked about the flat cap for the first 2 years and escrow being at 20% and then tapering down in the first 2 or 3 years. The Olympics, I mean, everybody's making such a big deal about the Olympics when I don't really think it's that big of a deal.
There was honestly no reason not to get the CBA done. Let's face it. I mean, this is like if you're right, Mike. If the Olympics are like a big negotiating point, like they're making it out to be, it shows you that there really weren't that many negotiating points here.
Right.
Like, this was really just like, I mean, the Olympics weren't the big negotiating point way back when, when we lost full seasons or half seasons. It's like the Olympics are not, there's not, let's put it frankly, the owners don't love the Olympics. They don't, but they also understand that there is a benefit to it. They understand the benefit to it.
What is the benefit? Because other than the players just getting to play and it's fun representing your country, there's no financial benefit.
Well, there is a benefit, right?
Potential of exposure.
That's it. It's just exposure.
I've talked to owners about this, and they will tell you flat out. I remember one time talking to Craig Ludwig in Minnesota, at that time in Nashville, now Minnesota, who said after the Olympic Games that the ticket sales go up big time for them. Like that people get into hockey. They just want to go see live hockey. They want to see the players that represent, like they said Yossi. People were watching Yossi on TV in Nashville, and then they go and see. They want to see him. There is a huge ticket benefit to this. There is a benefit directly that people get excited about hockey and want to go.
Well, I'm going to use a quote from Gary Bettman. The ultimate impact, the last Olympics. What year was this? Hold on. The last Olympics. This is in 24. Well, he's talking about 2014, I guess. Right. In 2016, his answer was the ultimate impact it had on the game worldwide was negligible, and that's true.
Right.
That's a negotiation talk there.
No, it's really not.
That's negotiating talk to me.
Yeah, but see, Russ, what he's saying is we don't think it's worthwhile, but we recognize the players think it's worthwhile.
Correct.
So
they do their analysis and say we get a short-term pop, right?
Yeah, it's a carrot. Here you go, players.
But you have to get something back for it.
From the owner's perspective, it's a short-term pop that they feel doesn't have a long-term impact.
Right.
They're going to look at that and say that, whereas the players, they're going to take those short-term pops because, again, that's exposure for them,
right? For
other potential areas and arenas that they might get into, that once their face becomes a little more recognizable. I mean, most people had no idea who TJ Oshie was prior to a regular fan, but it's
more right. And Jerry's the perfect example. Like your neighbors my neighbors who I never would talk to in a million years about hockey were coming up to me after the Olympics, knowing I work in hockey and saying, "Oh, what's the TJ Oshie guy?" Like that kind of thing. It was just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, he's the guy from Enterprise Rent-A-Car, isn't he?
Right.
And there is a revenue component also, right? There is jersey sales that go on. I mean, I can tell you, I have I mean, not everybody does. I have a Forsberg jersey, and I have a Forsberg jersey from Finland. I also have a Swedish jersey, Forsberg jersey, and a Solani jersey. There are people who will go out and buy Olympic jerseys, which
but the NHL and the players don't benefit from that.
I know, but the league does.
Right, but the interesting
thing,
they
don't.
No, but
there's sharing, isn't there?
No,
this is
correct. I thought there was a sharing of the revenue.
They haven't, but that's part of the agreement or part of the negotiation with the IOC. And one of the things that was mentioned was pending an agreement with the IOC. If the IOC is still intransigent, as they have been in the past, then the NHL is going to go tell them to, F off. So, I mean, it's not a guarantee that they're going to the 22 and 26 Olympics. By the way, the 22 Olympics is in Beijing, so I would be a little hesitant about that, but okay.
They're going to have to say something in about 8 months on that anyhow.
Just like Tokyo did.
Yeah. Now,
I see that getting moved back a year.
Now, other things, Elliot Friedman reported the 10% deferral for next year's salary that apparently would be on a payment plan, so that saves the NHL some upfront money. They paid the bonuses for the contracts ending June 30th yesterday, so they did that. This was the one thing that I was curious about. The NHL was pressing for changes in contract structure, meaning limits on signing bonus and less salary fluctuation on a year-to-year basis.
So no surprise.
Right now, this is okay. We don't know whether that's part of this, but again, this is a shot at the big market teams that can afford to pay heavy bonuses. And there's a different tax implication for signing bonuses for players as opposed to base salary. This was one of the only advantages that a team like New York or a team like Toronto or a team like Philadelphia had, where they could afford to pay Kevin Hayes $7 million on a $7.7 million salary up front. And that was the motivation for him to sign one place instead of the other place. It happened with Matthews, happened with Marner, happened with Tavares. If they limit that to, say, 50%, then okay, then it's more of an even playing field. But honestly, I think you have to give these big market teams some advantage, don't you?
But part of it also is how the contract is structured, right? How much of the contract is considered signing bonus versus how much is considered salary. That's the big piece we've seen, right? Especially years where we expect a lockout. If a guy is averaging X number of salary, sometimes 75 to 80% of that salary is considered a signing bonus and the rest of it is salary. That was the quote unquote lockout proof contract that was basically being signed, which is they want to get rid of as well. And the fluctuation is that percentage has been changed a couple of times in terms of the fluctuation year on year.
I mean, right now the rule is the minimum that you can pay a player is minimum salary, $700,000. So if a player is making $10 million a year, the signing bonus can be $9.3 million, and the base salary can be $700,000. And for a player like Austin Matthews, and I learned this because of a lot of stuff that was going on with him regarding his contract a little while back. He's in Arizona, which is a no state tax state, on July 1 when he gets the bonus, so he doesn't get hit with the Ontario taxes that he would if he was living in Ontario at the time. That's the way they like. It's all different based on like where these players are living at the time that they earn that bonus, and there's a certain tax cap in Ontario on bonuses as opposed to salary. So, those are the things that these players and their agents are figuring out. And if the NHL says, well, you can only pay 50% of the salary in bonuses and the rest has to be base salary, I think a lot of teams will be pissed off.
It's a big difference because, like what people never think about this whole thing, like, US dollars versus Canadian dollars. There's obviously a big difference there. And, players are all paid in US dollars. Mm-hmm. But, Canadian teams aren't charging fans US dollars to come to the games, so the Canadian teams are not making that money. And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And it's something that I think has long been going on that the owners, some of them have, obviously Canadian owners have a huge issue with, because it's like, how can we do this? I mean, we're not, are they overcharging by the same amount of percentage as American dollars? No, they can't. They're not doing that. They're not. So it's a tough spot. It's a tough spot to put the owners in if they have to. If it does turn out that they have to pay, basically all in American dollars, or pay if they have to pay Austin Matthews more money because, he's from we're technically housed in Arizona or whatever. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. I mean, maybe not for the Leafs, but for some teams it is. For most teams in Canada, it is. I would say, yeah. So that is definitely a real issue. I mean, it is surprising that the NHL and the NHLPA are getting this done. I'm hesitant to still write anything about it because I think we've kind of seen this get to this point before.
I think they know that they need it's a marriage of convenience right now. They know
it is, and I want to think that too. But this is definitely one of the things I am most hesitant to jump the gun on because it is one of those things that really we have seen so many times. And I pretty much grew out of a lockout, so I kind of this is my. I know that these guys aren't talking. I've been trying to get more information too. Like if it is Toronto and Vancouver as the home cities here. I was told originally that it wouldn't matter, if Toronto plays in Toronto, Vancouver plays in Vancouver, for example, or no, Toronto and Edmonton. I mean, if Edmonton plays in Edmonton, Toronto plays in Toronto. I think that's still the issue. Although I've heard mixed reports. I'm trying to get an absolute confirmation that they're fine putting Toronto in Toronto. But like you're saying, if in Edmonton, for example, if players are allowed to leave the bubble, that does change things. If Edmonton's playing in Edmonton. If you think about it, because if Edmonton's playing in Edmonton and they're allowed to leave the bubble, then they can go home essentially.
Right? No. They're saying that in spite of the fact that say Toronto would be in Toronto, they're going to be in the hotel.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're making it completely equal in terms of that because
but we're talking about in Edmonton, for example, they might be able to go out a little bit more because of the bubble because there's no virus up there or what have you.
Maybe, but they're still going to, in terms of they're not going to be able to go back and live at home. They're going to be in the hotel too.
Right. They have to report back. Like even the NBA said they can't have their families. No families. It's just
there will be some. We can say what we want. There will be some parameters and structures that are going to be put into place here that will limit some of that, but will limit potential unnecessary movement. Let's call it that.
Yeah. I mean, there has to be. And I wonder, you wonder if the NHL being, so Canadian based and so having so many Canadian teams and such a Canadian sport, if that's going to benefit them now versus the NBA, because if the NBA runs into a situation in Florida where where Florida continues to get worse, if we could see the NBA get eventually canceled here and the NBA go on. I'm curious about that. Just it may be a benefit to the NHL, being able to go to Canada, where maybe the NBA wouldn't.
Well, but there is an issue though, Eck, and we were talking before the air. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that we as Americans can't get into Canada. Even if we're going to cover hockey, we're going to stay in a hotel, they won't let us. I kind of wonder what will happen to hockey coverage in the U.S. for the next couple of months, because it's all going to be in Canada, and it's great that you could sort of recap a game maybe and get something off of Zoom, but it's going to be a hard sell to newspapers and other media companies here.
It's going to be a rights holder fest, basically.
Yeah.
If you're anybody independent, if you're anybody who's not necessarily completely tied in with the league, it's going to the situation I think is going to be very difficult.
That's what I'm saying. So, like a local nightly broadcast, what are they going to say as far as hockey coverage? Like normally, NBA, they're going to give 15 minutes. They're going to give 10 minutes or 15 minutes to football. They're going to give 5 minutes to baseball. Are they going to give 2 minutes to hockey because they can't even?
I think highlights how the team is doing, Russ. They're going to give coverage. It's just they're going to be getting. It's almost like with the Olympics in some ways.
Okay, but tell me. All right, good example. Right. So tell me how a Flyers fan's going to react when their guys aren't there and it's all coming from Canada and it's those guys calling the games. What do you think they're going to act like on Twitter?
I just don't think it's going to happen because I think that Zach and the guys.
It's going to affect the product.
The guys in Philadelphia and Zach, we're going to all going to have a place we can talk to players right after the game.
There's going to be exactly. There's going to be
everybody who's credentialed in that building is going to have a chance to do it, and then that is. It sucks for us because it isn't just there's a definite.
No, I'm not even talking about us. I'm talking about the fans. I think
fans will still get their news.
I think fans will be happy that hockey is back, but I also think you're never going to get any casual fans with it all being in Canada and the U.S. just sort of peeking in on it because there's going to be a disconnect.
You think the league is just going to honestly just go with that? I mean, I don't know.
I do. I think there's going to be a disconnect.
I don't think there will be.
I don't know. I think hockey fans will find their way.
Yeah, I think hockey fans, yes, but fans.
I mean, if you're having it on NBC and you're having it on their networks,
I mean, it doesn't really matter where it's being hosted. If it's being hosted, I mean, it really if it's quarantine, it's quarantine. It might as well be on Mars. Like it really doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah,
to me, the idea is as long as the beat reporters are given a chance after the games to talk to the players in some way, shape, or form, then I think it's fine. And
but the only problem with that, Eck, is that and I've been on many a conference call over the last few months. There is not the freedom there to be able to ask and follow up questions.
For sure.
Even like the like in Buffalo, like Mike Harrington, who's works with the Buffalo News, who's the dean of the Buffalo reporters, on a conference call when Terry Pegula and Kim Pegula were on there with Kevin Adams as the new general manager, he got to ask one question. And then they may have come around for a second question after all the other questions were asked, but he wasn't really able to follow up. And in a situation after a game, they're probably going to allow 5 or 6 questions on a Zoom conference call. It's not going to be the same thing. It's going to be limit. Right. And and you're going to really get the same sort of
leagues, though, Mike. If you think about it, every league's going to have that issue.
Yes.
No, everything's going to have that. I do think that I mean, the reporters.
Actually, I don't know that because baseball says they're going to have some media in there.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, reporters are.
Baseball said there's going to be media.
In general, the way these things work, to get anything.
Again, they're playing in their home stadiums too. That's the trade-off versus a hub.
Right. Like as you guys know, to get anything interesting from a player, really that you can write about that's maybe no one else is writing about, you have to talk to them individually, like after the scrum is broken up or what have you.
It has to be practice usually. If you're going to do any kind of feature,
right, that's more practice.
It's
not way better opportunity in practice, or to get somebody after a game that no one else is talking to, that everybody's talking to somebody else, somebody who's more the story, and you're kind of building off of something else. Or if you have a good enough relationship with the player, to just text them, which which does happen as well. And and I know the teams generally shy away from that, and they don't like you using quotes from text. But I'm curious if that would change at all, because you could have a situation where if you have a relationship with a player, like I could text a certain guy on the Flyers and get an opinion after a game. I'd wonder if that would be admissible, like in my story. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing will be interesting to see how that plays out, because in the past, that has not been admissible in stories to use like something out of a text message or something like that. I've gotten slapped on it a little bit. They don't care too much, but I've gotten slapped a little bit from it. But the Flyers are great with the media, and I think that of all the teams out there, we maybe have the least to worry about, where Mike has a little bit of a different kind of scenario going on.
Yeah, and
not great with the media, but it's definitely going to be harder for Mike, because there's so many people pushing on the Leafs and stuff like that, and it's a different world.
I think we'll all be happy there's games. Don't get me wrong, but the sport is not going to get the same kind of coverage that it had before. It's not.
I mean, and the big fear, Russ, and this is worth bringing up, is like, okay, this is like a one-time thing, right? Like, this is how it's going to work. The big fear whenever something like this, whenever the door like this opens to reporters who are not like the rights holders reporters, is always going to be the fear that this is how it's going to continue being.
Right.
After things get better, that we won't have as much access as the right holders, that they will find it. They will close the locker room and say, oh, well, I'll just have a Zoom thing in the locker room. The things like this could continue afterwards.
It was creeping in that direction anyway,
right?
In some ways, little by little.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it. There's no two ways about it.
Happening, so yeah,
and we've seen, like I've told the story many times about like when one of the guys, when Anthony Sanfilippo, who was covering who was working for the Flyers at the time, working for the PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, came in and broke the story about Claude Giroux being the captain, and I sat there in the media room with him, and I'm like, you're not breaking a story if you work for the team, man. It's like you are literally putting out a press release. That's like, it's very different. Like you work for the Flyers, you're not breaking a story, and because teams cover themselves, it's like that's a press release. And same goes for like even Bill Meltzer, who works for PhiladelphiaFlyers.com. When he works for them, stuff like that. Our own writer, he's different things when he writes something directly from the Flyers. That's he knows that's like information that he's getting privileged because he works for the team. And and when a team covers themselves, that's always an issue. So we've talked about that plenty in the fact.
So right now, there's not a big problem because everybody's practicing in their home rinks, and teams are being very good about getting players and quotes and all that. I think it's going to change when they get over into the hub city. We need
to get a bit more, again, just like everything, we need to get a bit more clarity with regards to, once you get there. And I think the communication with the PHWA and the writers and getting it from the league is going to be important. And for those who were saying, is this starting to complain about?
No.
Someone said in the comments, No, that's not about that. It's
Yeah.
making sure that you get the best coverage and most rounded coverage.
We're a conduit to the fans. That's what we are.
That's all we're talking about here is making sure you have an alternate, viewpoints, or not just alternate viewpoints, but
viewpoints that don't, it does matter more, it should matter more to you when an opinion comes from someone who doesn't get paid by the people that are giving them the opinions. I mean, it's like, and that's nothing to say that there aren't great writers working for the teams, but the reality is when you work for a team, it's very hard for you to be critical of them. It's just, that is the reality of it. I mean, we live in a world where, there aren't that many journalism jobs in hockey anymore. And, it's tough. I remember Panaccio used to work for Hockey Buzz, and then he said he would never, ever, ever work for the Flyers. Like he would never work for Comcast because he said that's just a ridiculous, that I wouldn't be able to be a real reporter if I worked for them. And he's not the only one who, from that old school that said it, that ended up doing the exact same thing. It's just like that. And I don't blame him for doing it. Like they say, there's not so many jobs, but for you out there, you're not going to get hockey rumors from the Philadelphia Flyers. Like I've always said that. Like that, my job is like, counter to what they want, and yet they still give me access in there because they know that I'm honest, at least. But you're not going to get, the Flyers aren't going to give you a hockey rumor. Bill Meltzer's not going to be able to report a hockey rumor, and he knows that. It's just that, and he hears things all the time, and he can't tell me. It's just like this. The reality is he works for the team, and that's his job, right? Doesn't mean he can't be critical a little bit. And the Flyers are a little different because they really are. I'm talking to other people around the league. They are one of the better teams, like as far as this goes. Like they really,
any question about that in terms.
They really do. Like Zach Hill, who runs the Flyers media thing overall, and is the general overall overlord of the whole thing.
Oh, he's tremendous.
Is known as one of the best in the world. Like he is absolutely, and to us too, and to everybody. Like he has been incredible.
Brian and Joe and everybody.
Brian and Joe, these guys are like they get the fact that a free media is important to them. They get the checks and balances thing. They don't call it on you if you say like a player sucked in tonight. You're not going to get in trouble for that.
Like my basic thing before this, and I still think it's going to be an issue, is if you're a fan of Michael Raffel, how many times are you going to hear from Michael Raffel during the Hub City thing? If you're a fan of a lesser fourth line player, how often are you going to hear from that guy? Because they're only going to go 3 or 4 players deep after a game and maybe 2 or 3 at practice, and that's it.
Only if he does something consequential. So,
and the last thing I'll say on this, because this is kind of boring.
We should get on the
last thing I will get into UFAs. The last thing I'll say on this is this: like that, the big fear here is that teams are definitely trying to promote their websites. And if you work for that website, you work for PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, and it's your job to get PhiladelphiaFlyers.com traffic and to be, do that. If you're doing that, that's your job. If you're like the head of it all, and you see a story come out from somebody that's not PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, and that story gets a lot of traffic, you're going to be like, hey, why don't we have that story on our site? In which case, at that point, you start to see how some teams out there could start to cut off access to other people to keep the big stories that are being reported on the team to come out on the team site. So there's that. You can see that. That we've seen that trend before, and that's something to look out for. But anyway, let's move on to UFAs, which is what we should be discussing today, because it is July 1st after all. I put my top 5 together, and I'll give them to you guys and give you my thoughts on where some of them are heading. You can let me know what you think as well.
Yeah, and we're not stretching like we normally do on July 1 and mention that it's Bobby Bonilla Day, Russ, because we always have to mention that on July 1.
It's Brizgalov Day.
You know what? I'm going to say my retort. Manny Ramirez hasn't been in the league in 10 years. He gets $2 million a year. Matt Holliday gets $10 million a year, and Todd Helton gets $15 million a year for the next 10 years. No, I'm just saying these guys are actually getting more. But anyhow,
you want just 10% of their salary and you'd actually do something for them. All right, here we go. Taylor Hall, number 1. I think it's unmistakable that Taylor Hall's the number 1 UFA. I mean, there are people out there. I've looked at some of the lists, and some have Alex Pietrangelo as number 1.
Yeah, he's Taylor Hall is not number 1. It's Pietrangelo.
No, I still think it's Taylor Hall, because I think I'm going to back Eck on this, because I think there's still a small chance Pietrangelo goes back to the Blues.
And I think that's the main reason that he maybe is being kept off the list, top number 1 for some people like myself, because I think that it's more than a small chance. I think that's what the Blues really intend.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was going to say, I think you could probably say Hall. You probably say 1 and 1A until Pietrangelo under contract. Yeah. I wouldn't put him above him, but if we know that it's not going to happen with St. Louis, he might pip him in that case.
Yeah, if it was sure, if he said I'm leaving the Blues, then yeah, he becomes a defenseman, probably even more valuable. I agree with that. But for now, I'm going to say 70% to the Blues still, and that's not fully the Blues, but 70%. Where I have Hall, I would say would be like 20% to Arizona. tops. Like I think Arizona will make a play, but I don't think that's where he's going to go. Hall is like I've written about before and talked about before. He's very much seems to be following from everybody I've talked to. It's close to him and people around the league, the John Tavares map, which is that he wants to return home. He is from Red Deer, Alberta, which is a suburb of Calgary, and he is definitely wants to be a Calgary Flame from all I've heard. And and you remember he loved being an Edmonton Oiler. He likes Alberta. That's his that's his land. That's his place. He was really unhappy to be traded out of Edmonton. And I think that he looks at this like I'm a UFA. I'm going to pick where I'm going to play. I'm going to play someplace where I really want to play. And I think that this is Hall's future.
And G provided what they're going to offer him though.
Right. And Calgary like Toronto had to play along with that, with Tavares to make that happen. You got to have two people but Calgary wants him too. That's the other thing I've heard. To the point where they're going to entertain moving Gaudreau to do it. And that means that's a big deal if Calgary's willing to do that. So when you look at it, there are other teams. There are other teams out there, and the other teams I've come up with so far are the Sabres, which we've talked about a little bit, which a lot of people will say
that's the Ralph Kruger, but with the Sabres, that's the Ralph Kruger connection. But with the Sabres, that would mean either finding some sucker, and I'm saying sucker because it's a $9 million salary and it's overpaid to take Jeff Skinner, which nobody will. Or that they trade Sam Reinhart because Reinhart is coming up on a big payday. They would have to do that. And the thing is that Hall is not what they need in terms of position. He's not a center. He's
not a center. And that's a big deal. We've talked about that too, which is another thing that could keep him off the number one spot, perhaps, if you're looking at him versus Pietrangelo. But the Islanders are another team that does have a real interest in Taylor Hall. They always have. They've tried before to get him. And then a surprise team that when I was talking to people, and that's the Colorado Avalanche, which is a team that
they've got the money.
They have the money. They have the cap space now, but they have so many young prospects that the way they have to be looking at this thing is like eventually they're going to have to pay these guys. So it's they're very much in that situation that Toronto was in a few years ago, where Toronto looked like they had the money to spend, but really didn't.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, though, and we know what happened in Toronto, the domino effect of the Nylander contract that was 6 years, and then it led to Marner and it led to Matthews. If Joe Sakic holds the line and gets a guy like Makar to take a bridge deal, maybe he doesn't want to have him take a bridge deal because he'd probably be a benefit to get him locked up long term. But if you get some of those young players to take bridge deals, then they can't afford a guy like Taylor Hall. But go ahead.
The only thing I would say is if it gets to the point where some team is pretty sure if they make an offer, it's going to be more than what Calgary is going to take, and Hall might do it, then let's say it's Colorado, they might be willing to trade like Tyson Jost to the Coyotes for the rights, to see if that happens. And I could see something like that happen.
I can see it because Colorado has the people to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now remember, the Sharks offered more to Tavares than Toronto did. It is still, I think if it gets to a certain number, Tavares and Hall are similar cats that way. There are people, they both will play where they want to play if it's the difference of $9.5 and $9 million. Like, I don't think that's going to change things.
There's be a substantial jump where he would be crazy.
Yeah, right. If you're talking $2 million difference in place, that's a year. That's something. But like,
I would also say, Hall would also have to look at, even though it's basically his legacy contract, I guess he'd also have to look at it and say, where do I have a chance to really sort of vault up legacy-wise as I go forward in my career in terms of my numbers? Playing in Colorado with McKinnon.
Yeah.
I like Monahan, don't get me wrong. I just feel like if he's going to really vault up the ladders, having him and McKinnon together really dynamite.
That's significant.
One thing, though, Anthony, the thing is that, Hall was miffed when he was traded from Edmonton. And what's the sweetest revenge?
Go to Calgary.
Going to Calgary and sticking it to the Oilers.
Yeah, exactly. Just stick it into the.
That's no question. I think it's more about like that's where he's from. But yeah, I get it. I get that. That's nice.
It's a definite.
And this could change too based on what we see happen in these playoffs. Like if Hall comes out and has a really strong playoff, that could change his number to the point where maybe Calgary can't do it, or if the Avalanche have a really strong playoff or have a bad playoff, the Avalanche could look either way. The Avalanche could look either more attractive to Hall, or they might be going harder in for Hall.
Or if Calgary has a bad playoff and loses in the first round, they'll be even more desperate to add a guy to Hall, so that would probably boost his price.
Yeah. So I think that he's a go. Now, Pietrangelo, like I said, the Blues have said all the right things, but when you look at what they've done, and Mike has pointed this out every time they've done it, and you've been right about it, And look at what they've done by making certain trades and certain signings along the way. The Blues have definitely been setting up as if they won't be able to re-sign him.
Right.
They've been setting it up, or at least an insurance policy, to the point where and every time Rutherford's been asked, he's always said the same thing. He's like, "Oh, our intention is still to sign Hall, but we also have to keep doing things, and we do other things too." So,
well, I mean, I think Doug Armstrong has really planned it out that he's got a fallback. I mean, he has Parayko under control for another couple of years. They traded for an extended Justin Falk. They traded for an extended Scandella. They have a young guy like Vince Dunn. They have Perunovic, who was the Hobie Baker. He won it, right, Russ? Perunovic won the Hobie Baker.
Yeah, Scott Perunovic won the Baker.
So he could step in next year. They're prepared if they can't get Pietrangelo to take a hometown discount. I think that even in this market, even with the flat cap, Kevin has said this on previous shows. I believe it. There's some team that's going to pay him 9.5. Yeah, but the problem is, I think the team that he would like to go to probably can't unless they trade a player away, and that would be the Leafs. Yeah. But there are other teams, and Colorado's another one of those teams, because Colorado, imagine they add Pietrangelo to the defense that they have right now, how good that they would be.
Yeah, it becomes there comes a point at which you have the sum does not equal the parts. If you keep adding, we've seen this before. If you keep adding great players, they become less great if they're surrounded by other great players, because there's only so much puck to go around. The issue is there's only so much they can do. And
the only thing with Pietrangelo is, if let's say St. Louis gets close and they lose a game in overtime, or they make it to the finals and lose, he still may want to give it another go with that team.
Sure. And after the mix again, he was the captain of the team when they won the Stanley Cup. There's an emotional attachment between the players, between the team, the city, the player, the fans. Losing Peter, that's something that cannot be discounted. It's a cold. I mean, you sometimes have to make cold decisions if you want to stay on top, but that almost seems like a real. Even as they prep themselves with these moves that they've made defensively. Yeah, and another thing to make it to actually go through that.
It's a great point. It really is.
You can't ignore the potential sentimentality of a player wanting to go back for one more kick at the can. I get that, but with Pietrangelo being 30. If say St. Louis, all St. Louis is prepared to offer him is we'll offer you a 1-year deal so you can take another kick at the can, and he's got a 7-year deal someplace else, he's taking the 7-year deal, no matter how much he loves playing in St. Louis and how much I think he's taking the long-term security. You really can't.
You would think so. I mean, there's every once in a while there's a player that doesn't follow that, but you're right.
Stamkos did it.
Yeah, Stamkos didn't. I remember, Forsberg was one who would turn down money to stay in certain places. He would do different things too. I mean, there's certain players that do that, but Now the other teams that are interested in Pietrangelo that I've been able to find so far, and there's a lot of them, obviously, because you can sit back and say everybody would love to have Pietrangelo on their team. But teams that actually have interest, the Devils are an interesting one. The Devils would put a lot of money probably forward to him. This is the player that I was told they would go all in on, and that means that could be like $9 to $10 million a year to be a Devil.
But if you're him, why would you do it?
If you're him, why would you do it? That's the thing. Depends. I mean, sometimes guys get into the idea of them being the savior of a team. He comes in there, I'm going to be the guy that takes this team around. If he looks around, there are some good young players on that team.
Why are the Devils spending all this money all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Because it's always a good question, Russ. But
they have John Harris basically trying to help by getting Pietrangelo. I think that it's a little cynical, but you get a marquee free agent.
Yeah,
it helps to boost interest level. Although you already have,
they tried to do that with Subban.
I agree. They tried to do it with Subban. They're trying to shore up the defense further. But this guy has a real great track record. He has got the Stanley Cup, so you can say that this is another move to try to solidify, between the Sixers and the
right.
Potentially, I don't know where he's at with regards to potentially looking at the Mets, Russ. But fill me in on that. But
he's in the running, and that's the other thing.
Typically gets Harris closer to getting what he needs in order to establish that East Coast sports network, like Empire.
Right, exactly. I mean, other teams in there. Columbus, I've heard, which is interesting because Columbus is a team that has such a great defense right now.
Yeah.
For them to go that way seems odd, but they're definitely they definitely have talked about it. Florida, which is a team that needs a lot of defense, obviously, and
wow, that would necessitate them trading Yandel or trading Matheson.
Yeah, they'd have to do something there. I agree with that. Toronto, like you said, Mike, would necessitate something else as well. It would be
a Nylander trade if they sign Pietrangelo. Nylander is as good as gone.
Right, and Montreal is the other one.
That would make perfect sense for Montreal because God knows they don't have any. Well, yeah, excuse me. They have Weber and they have Petrie on the right side. So the last thing they need is another right-handed defenseman.
No, yeah, but at least he's a different level, right? So, the next guy I have on my list is Torrey Krug at number 3. And Krug is an interesting one because I don't think he's ever gotten the credit he deserves until now. Like it seems like suddenly that he's a UFA, people are writing about how good this guy's been because he's been very good for a long time.
I know a lot of people think, and based on the way the chatter was during the year, that Krug was pretty much gone. But I have a weird feeling based on some of the deals that the Bruins made closer to the deadline. Remember, they got rid of Backus's contract. They cleared. Yeah. They're only retaining a $1.5 million of the $6 million contract that he had. So they cleared a lot of cap space, but they got back Kasha, they got back Richie, but they saved some money there. I think that Krug could probably be re-signed if he takes a little less, but the problem is in this market, it's Pietrangelo, it's him, and it's Tyson Barrie.
Right.
I think he's probably
a big drop off after Krug to Tyson Barrie in my mind.
Yeah, it does. And so he probably could get 7.5. But the question is, does he want to take a little less and stay in Boston and win a Stanley Cup, or go to Detroit or someplace like that and maybe not win one ever?
Yeah, a team that loves him, I've been told, is the Edmonton Oilers, and they're a team that's going to look hard at Torrey Krug. Whether or not they can get that done or not is a big question, but you can see him fitting in on that team. That's a great spot for him. That's the Oilers need that kind of player.
It gives him just enough of a window to make sure that he gets a good deal. Plus, with the best player in the world, in Connor McDavid and the lineup that they have, it would be very attractive.
Yeah, he finally solidifies a defense that has some players, but doesn't have that kind of player.
Krug is one of the best. He's just a tough fire plug who can give you just about a little bit of everything and everything you could need. So.
Right, and the leg is getting tougher.
It's about term with Krug. You're not giving him a 7-year deal. Nobody's going to give Torrey Krug a 7-year deal.
Probably 5 or 6. But again,
I don't even know if they give him 6. He might get 5.
Again, that would necessitate Ken Holland doing something like trading, buying out the last year of Chris Russell's contract, or trading Ryan Nugent-Hopkins a year before he becomes a UFA, because you're going to have to clear the space.
Right. You do. You have to figure out something like that.
But if you get good assets, let's say it's Nuge, you're going to get pretty good assets in return. It's just a matter of trying to be smart and keeping things rather quiet before you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the idea that, and boom, you make both deals happen relatively close to one another.
Yeah.
And then that works. That's a great move by Holland then if he's able, depending on the returns. But Nuge, I think, again, we all know top 6 center. We know he's a top 6 forward.
Oh, yeah. And one of the better defensive.
Comes down the middle is going to have interest in him.
Yeah. And the thing about Holland is Holland has a history in Detroit of doing that exact thing, Anthony. Like that is his MO. He's put together multiple deals before. In very short notice. That happened together, and he definitely not a lot of GMs can pull that off. That's a tough thing to pull off. The after Krug, I go to Mike Hoffman, number 4, who I've said before, this is like Florida's target, what I was told, but there are other teams, of course. The Islanders, the Wild, the Kings, the Jets are the teams that I've been picking up on so far.
The only one of those 4 that I don't think makes any sense is Winnipeg, because
I thought that too. I know.
Yeah, they're loaded at forward, and they have to spend money on their defense, especially
unless they're trading one of their forwards.
Yeah, that's what I never know. Like I always say, like people, like the funniest thing about trade rumors is that people attack them like we do logically, which is what I do too.
Right.
You sit there, and logic only works if you have every piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
If you don't have every piece of the puzzle, then you don't know why Winnipeg would be interested in Mike Hoffman.
Right.
I tend to look at that, like if I hear from a good source that Winnipeg's interested in Mike Hoffman, I tend to look at that, like who are, like exactly what you're saying. They must be thinking of moving another forward, because that's the only reason that makes sense. So that's
right. And
Hoffman even.
And with Winnipeg, I mean, the guy probably the logical one would be Nick Ehlers, because he's locked up for 5 more years at $6 million. He had a pretty decent year. I don't think they're trading Wheeler. I don't think they're trading Connor. I don't think they're trading Line or Shifley.
What's left on Little's deal?
Little has.
He's got to be.
He's the guy.
Yeah, but Russ, he's coming off an injury where they don't.
I know, but you'll sweeten it to get rid of him. But I think he's the guy. I don't think
let's face it. I mean, Ehlers probably can get you. They need defense. Let's get down to it right. Yeah. Ehlers, I think, could potentially draw you a defenseman that solidify that back.
Yeah, like a top 4.
A top 4 defenseman.
Yeah. Be a top 4 defense, which is exactly what they would need. So that's how you have to look at it if you're going the Hoffman route.
Right. If you're going to Hoffman route. Number 5 I have is Robin Lehner. Remember, he's on the Vegas Knights. Like, it's funny. Like, a lot of people don't even. That's obvious to us and everybody here. But it's funny when I was talking to some people the other day about Robin Lehner, who are just like casual hockey fans, but more sports fans. They're like, Robin Lehner, oh yeah, he's the guy on the Islanders, right? No, he was on Chicago this year, and then he's now he's on the Vegas Golden Knights. I heard when Robin Lehner left Chicago that the Hawks went to him and said, "We want you back in the summer."
Right.
I had heard that, and that they said, "We're going to move you right now because we're not making the playoffs." Ha ha ha. And and because we're not making the playoffs, we want to move you and we're going to get assets for you. And, had they known that this was the case, that this was going to happen like this, we probably wouldn't have moved Robin Lehner at all. But they really liked him there. He was a good fit. He liked it there too. But now he's in Vegas. And,
Chicago very much is in sort of an in-between state right now.
Yeah.
And how old is Lehner now?
Lehner's 29.
Yeah, he's younger.
He's getting into the point of his career where he's gonna want good contract, but he's also gonna want to win.
Right.
And in Vegas, how many more years does Marc-Andre do you guys think have Fleury? I mean, what's the current contract situation there?
He's got 2 more years left.
Yeah, I think that's it for him. I think 2 years he'll be out of runway.
He'll be out of runway. So the question, I think Vegas didn't necessarily make this trade just to sort of have Lehner necessarily just as a rental. I think.
No, I agree with that.
But if you're Lehner, Anthony, the thing is, do you want to be the 1A one or the 1B to Fleury for another 2 years?
It won't be for 2 years. It might only be for 1 year because Fleury is likely to get hurt again. And if Leonard comes in and plays better,
up at that point, Fleury,
he could supplant him for the job. He could.
Now the thing is, and I put some stock.
What he wants.
I put some stock in what X saying about Chicago because there is a possibility that Corey Crawford retires. I mean, The thing is, he did have a good year, and he might be able to get another contract out of it. The question is whether he would take less to re-sign in Chicago, and then you just reunite the tandem that was there this year with Lehner and Crawford, or does Lehner want that contract like Varlamov got last year from the Islanders? And the team that probably gives him that, because they tried to trade for him at the deadline but cheaped out because they wouldn't give up a first-round pick, was Carolina.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, if I'm Lehner, I don't know if I want to go to Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a good defense in front of them, but I mean, they've tried to get him twice, and they've come up short both times.
They do bizarre things, and we should probably mention at this point while talking about Carolina the Rick Dudley thing yesterday, because he's him leaving the Carolina Hurricanes about not just basically not being re-upped. As we knew yesterday's contracts are going to end for a lot of scouts.
There's a lot of speculation, and I don't know how much of it is realistic because we know right now that the Sabres are a tire fire. That Dudley, living in Western New York, worked a Sabres alum, was formerly a head coach, I think a general manager of the Sabres in the past. So, he had some association to the organization that he would be, and his scouting.
His hybrid scouting system with Carolina is going to make it very attractive to a team that's looking at alternate routes.
Carolina's going to feel the loss. They are.
Right. And Buffalo, I mean, if they're really buying into that hybrid scouting, as Anthony mentioned, I mean, really, Kevin Adams needs a veteran, savvy sounding board, and there's nobody better than Rick Dudley. I just don't know whether the Sabres would do it because it makes too much sense. That's the problem. It's like, if it happens for him, it's great. It's great for him because – he would be able to work close to home, probably a little less traveling.
Depends on whether how he envisions himself with Adams,
and how much money.
And of course, how much money you're going to get paid,
and how much.
If I have, if I'm more of a AGM consigliere, whatever you want to use phrase here, to Kevin Adams.
Tom Hagen, yeah.
Yeah. If you're going to be that, at the very minimum, you're going to say, well, I'd like to be compensated. If I'm really kind of helping the structure in place, I'd like to be compensated for that.
And a little bit of control in terms of people that he wants to hire. Because, I haven't heard anything.
Direct, maybe 2 or 3 people that he definitely wants to bring in with him in order to implement this system effectively. And how Adams is going to look at this and say, how much power do I actually have here if Rick's coming in? So both guys have to be comfortable with the arrangement for it to work.
And the other thing that was reported with that is, and I forget which 2, but Carolina is still negotiating with 2 other
coaches.
2 other coaches, and so you never know if they don't take a salary cut, they may be gone too.
And John Forsland too, as well. They're doing that again. But
are they doing that again with Forsland too?
They're negotiating with Forsland again too. And I wonder whether the departure of Dudley means more control and more power to Eric Tulsky moving in that direction and player, because he was mostly analytics, but now
that's a tough call there, because again, you're looking at someone.
You have to know what Eric's desire is, and I don't want to certainly speak for him, but people I have that says Eric likes the role that he has with the Hurricanes.
Yeah,
I don't know if he necessarily wants. Again, I can't speak. These are only just a second or third hand from people I may have.
One other thing I wanted to add to the Winnipeg scenario, they signed Dylan Sandberg, and I think Dylan Sandberg can play right away. He just can't play this season because when you sign a guy this year, same as the Russian players, they can't play in the playoffs this year. I think Winnipeg's going to use him right away. And so if they use him right away, their defense is not nearly as bad as what we're talking about because he could play.
I have an interesting text going on. Continue, guys, for 1 second here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My apologies.
I'm a little surprised.
It's an answer to one of our questions, though, maybe.
Okay. I'm a little surprised that one of the top 5 free agents, and I'm sure he'll probably be in 6 through 10, isn't Tyson Barrie. But I think that the reason that he isn't is because of the sort of up and down year that he had with Toronto. And, Jan, you've been doing, on a call, so I'll get your input on this first. The failure of Mike Babcock in Toronto in the first couple months of the season likely cost Tyson Barrie maybe 1 or 2 years in terms of term, and probably $1 million to $1.5 million a year. Because if you look at his stats, I think he has 39 points now. In the second half under Sheldon Keefe, he played well. Defensively, he's never been great, but offensively, point man on the power play, effective, carrying the puck up the zone. But that early start with Babcock and Babcock wanting him to play defensively, I think killed him in terms of hitting it big in free agency.
So part of it was when they brought him on board, and Mike, you can talk better than me, is that, you had Morgan Riley there, who was their power play captain already. Right. Barrie has always filled that role. On the flip side, you could argue the work that Babcock did to try to get him to play better defensively paid dividends in the second half of the year after Keefe came on board, because some of the principles he may have learned may have been able to apply. I do think also, remember, flat cap is also going to hurt him.
Yes.
Because guys aren't going to have the kind of money that he wants, and the cap's going to stay flat for 2 years and maybe go up $1 million in the third year. When you're thinking of longer-term deals in the AAV, that's got to be a factor in terms of what you're going to offer guys. So it's one of the things I was talked about is I think a lot of deals that we think where guys would have made a lot of money or more money are going to be scaled back substantially because of the impact of the cap. And Barrie played well in Colorado, but a lot of that was driven by his offensive play, not his defensive play, which can fluctuate, right? Defensively, you can always be solid defensively. Offense can come and go, even though Toronto was a good team, and Toronto did struggle at times,
right?
Especially in terms of the power play.
Russ, I compare him, and I compare the deal that he's likely to get to what Shattenkirk got from the Rangers, because I think they're similar type defensemen, both right-hand shots, both around the same age when they signed those deals. And Shattenkirk, I believe, got 4 years.
I don't think he's getting 4 years, Barrie. Do
you think he'll get 3?
I think based on what happened with Shattenkirk, he gets 3 tops.
Okay, I mean, he's only 29.
It has nothing to do with the age. It's everything that we're talking about. I don't think teams are going to be willing to go in that deep with him anymore.
Yeah, he's 20. He's 28 right now.
Right.
So,
and Shattenkirk took a little discount dollar-wise to come to the Rangers also. It was 6.65, and part of that was impacted by his injuries.
Yeah.
That is, you saw regression when he went to Washington and struggled in that system as well, which we thought when he came to the Rangers, the problem is the system they played didn't necessarily play to his strengths.
And supposedly there was some interest at the deadline or close to the deadline regarding Barrie from Vancouver, where he's from, but the Vancouver wasn't willing to give up enough for the Leafs to make the deal. I don't know whether Vancouver has the cap space to be able to spend on a Tyson Barrie. Maybe he takes the Shattenkirk haircut to go back home. But
is he going to play on the second power play?
That's what I mean. It's like,
no, I don't think so.
You've got Quinn Hughes as your point guy on the power play for the next decade, so it sort of takes away, a team that
you can't pay a guy top dollar and then just use him on the second power play. No team's going to do that.
Well, unless they go with 2 defensemen on the power play, but that hurts them because they have so many good forwards.
Yeah, they're not going to do that, I don't think. You're right.
Right. The question, Mike, is who has the money to pay him? I think that's honestly the bigger question with all this is who has the cap space in general, A, and B, more importantly, who has the cap space and is a location where somebody would want to go to? Because we all know there are certain teams, but team players may not necessarily want to go there.
Well, I mean, one of the teams that has the cap space is the team that he was traded from, which is Colorado, but I don't think they're going to go.
So many blue liners, they don't need to go that direction.
Yeah, they got Girard and they got Makar. I mean,
and they have Timmins still in their system. That Bynum was coming up. I mean,
I don't know if he wants to go there, but the team that would make sense that would be able to pay him and that needs a defenseman, especially a right-handed defenseman more than anybody, is Winnipeg. He probably would get paid. I think he'd get 4 years there, and I think he'd get $6.5 to $7 million there because
I'll tell you who could use him. The Islanders could use him because they probably would like to trade Leddy. And I think they're going to try and trade Leddy, and then there's a spot open for Barrie there.
Or Boychuk.
Boychuk, I don't think they can move, but Leddy, I think you can move.
Sorry about that. I don't have any information yet. I'm going back and forth, and it's funny because sometimes I ask a person a question that is really. You always try to phrase a question. This is to somebody in a way that they have to answer it. You know what I mean? Like you want, or if they don't answer it, that answers it for you. Like that's my way of putting questions out to people often when I'm trying to get.
I want to point this out too for Barrie, and Mike could probably speak to this really well. He always was, not a great takeaway, giveaway guy, but reasonable where you could say, all right, his offense makes up for it. This year, it's 16 takeaways to 62 giveaways.
Yeah, no, defensively,
that's not reasonable.
No, even the analytics people in Toronto who liked to trade, couldn't justify it. He was, early on. Remember, he didn't have a goal for the entire time Babcock was there, and then when Babcock got fired, he scored in his first game.
Tactics and deployment and all that play a role. If your prior history,
but if your prior history is like that
department. But that means it becomes even more. If you're only solid in that department,
correct,
you go to a different system, and it becomes much more exacerbated.
Right. They weren't the
right match.
Babcock was not asking him to be a shutdown guy, but he was asking him to be more responsible in his own end, and he was asking him not to rush the. It seemed a lot of time not to carry the puck, not to counterattack.
No, but the idea is what I guess I'm basically saying is unless he goes to a team that needs a top guy in their power play, there's no point in signing Tyson Barrie.
No, he's got to go. He's got to be the power play quarterback, and it makes no sense for a team to It makes no sense for Vancouver to spend money on him. The money it would take to sign him with Quinn Hughes. They got their guy, but somebody out there needs a power play quarterback, and he would be a guy to sign. Question is where and how much.
Right.
We'll talk about that tomorrow.
Well, what I was saying was that so I put a question out to somebody at the NHL who would know the answer, and you try to put it in a way that they're either going to answer it or they're not going to answer it. And I sort of have this relationship with people that if you can't tell me something, don't answer. And that's honestly a good way to do things sometimes because if I don't get an answer, I kind of do get an answer, but they're not admitting to anything. Or I get this sometimes, which is the response that I'm not sure I understand the question, which means that. And in my history, just for what it's worth, when you get I don't understand the question, and you have a relationship with somebody that you're going to answer or not going to answer it, it means that they are putting it off for a bit, which means that we might be seeing something very soon to be announced regarding something for the NHL. That's just an instinctual thing. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but I'm just saying that it's a good way of doing things sometimes, and it keeps people from getting in trouble. If you have a good relationship with them, they're understanding of that. So if I do get an actual response, I tried to rephrase the question, which was really not that complicated. So to not understand it. So we might be hearing something from the NHL soon, is what I'm thinking.
All right.
There you have it.
Yep. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. where we have John Shannon for 20 minutes.
That's right. John Shannon's going to join us tomorrow, which is always fantastic.
Awesome.
Thanks to everybody today for watching.
By then, you can talk about.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk